Hey Paul, hey Karen, how you guys doing this week?
Hanging
To
in.
see you guys.
Yeah, been an interesting week when we last talked. The Red Sox were in the middle of an historic streak, and now it's just the dog days of summer. Paul, we're just lumbering around 4.5 games behind the Yankees, and hoping to have a chance to catch up with you guys. So yeah,
I'm just happy we're still somewhat in front of you
yeah,
and not far behind Tampa Bay. What was it?
no, it's crazy.
I think it was a game and a half yesterday.
Yeah, I think it'll be probably three after today or something.
Yeah,
2.5 or three. Yeah.
yeah.
So, but no,
I'm
it's been
already
interesting. Yeah.
I'm already moving on to the Patriots.
Yeah, the camp yesterday
Hey,
was
training
yeah,
camp's open.
yeah. They got because of the early game against Seattle, which I don't understand how the NFL did that. I'm sorry, I got some ink on my hands here. I don't understand how the NFL decided that. Yeah, the world wants to see the Patriots Seahawks over again to start the season. Everybody thought that was a good
But you know
idea.
what? It seems ironic, but marketing it actually does sell. It's weird.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah. That's it. It'll be interesting. Well, they brought a couple people in. Looks like they didn't have. Looks like May didn't have great practice today. This is when this is going back to the days of Brady. You start measuring every practice, so it's fun
years
times.
ago when I was coaching. So this would have been in the 80s, 90s, coaching up in Brigham City, Utah. And we would go for a coach's retreat to the Broncos camp. And it was
Oh
cool
wow.
because we had passes so we could be right on the field with the
Um,
drills and the whole nine. And, on the first day of camp, the veterans don't care. Maybe they're hungover a little bit, but some guy that was just chirping at Elway.
yeah.
And I'm
Wow.
telling you
LA.
what,
Wow.
he threw a dime and just nailed this guy on the outside, chopping at him. But it was really cool. We got to be right in the huddles and listen to the
Great.
drills, and
The
it was
LA,
pretty
the
fun.
LA
But
cross. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it
Right,
was
right,
pretty
drill it
cool.
right into him.
Pretty
That's
fun.
great. Well, I think it's kind of again it's settling in now a little bit. Fun for the Red Sox streak there, but like Karen said, it's I always said the Red Sox goal for the last 20 years and most years is get us to Patriot season. So
Yeah, pretty much.
so,
But with now the way it works, with all the wild cards, they're
yep.
they're right there.
Oh yeah, well everybody, they
Yeah.
made an interesting
Listen, we can
trade
be
yesterday. So yeah, well
we can be hopeful and just, not
yeah,
putting all my eggs in that basket
yeah.
anymore.
Hey, you guys have more championships that are recent than we
Oh,
do,
yeah.
so I just kind of sit here and bite my tongue and
In 2021, Jake and I ran up to game three of the ALCS. It was just coming off of COVID and it was like a surprise season for them. And they played the Astros, and it was a game they really pounded. It was the last game they won. The Astros swept three after that, but they went
yeah.
up 2-1 in the series. But Schwarber hit a grand slam in his
Yeah.
brief time in Boston, and I have never heard Fenway Park that loud. So it's a great place to be when they're winning. It's just a lot of fun.
Years ago, again, I'm the oldest in the room, so I get to use that. But I didn't get to go. I was a freshman in college, so that would have been the fall of '78. Don't say anything, Karen.
Uh,
And
uh,
but that was the series the Yankees and the Dodgers played. And remember that game that Nettles made all those great
yeah,
plays
definitely, yeah.
with Jimmy and a couple friends. They all just went down,
You
and
know what's what's really interesting, Paul, and I was surprised when somebody brought this up, but WAR is obviously the big stat in baseball now.
right,
You look at Nettles' WAR in the 70s, as good, better than Schmidt's, I think. I mean,
yeah.
we didn't appreciate it at the time, but he did all the things that you're supposed to do to
Well, he
win.
was
We
made
just
for Yankee
weren't looking at the
Stadium.
right numbers.
Yep, just had that porch in left and right field.
Yeah.
But Jimmy and a bunch of the guys went to that game and saw him make all
Wow.
those great plays and stuff.
Yeah,
So
that's great. That's
yeah,
awesome. That's awesome. Well, now we get to go to America's favorite sport. So we get to keep score of our political scoreboard. So I always, even when I was a kid, I used to tell them that politics is our favorite sport. I love the numbers. So, but I think we're turning the corner
okay.
100
But
days from
before
today.
before we jump in,
Yep.
because I know we didn't talk about this, but just in the spirit of it, I know I can light a fire under Karen.
Yep.
Okay,
Go for it.
let's talk about just briefly the president's performance at the rescheduled dinner and the irony of some of the awards that were given out while he's sitting there. And the Asian woman, I can't remember her name, that just spoke so eloquently. Just that, did you guys see that split screen they showed of her speaking, doing a great job talking about her folks bringing her over, and Trump just he can't even nod or appreciate her story. But his performance at the White House Correspondent Dinner, again, exceptional. On what scale?
Performance as in looking like a live human being. Yeah,
We'll set the bar as low as we can because it
yeah.
did look like he was sleeping most of the night.
Definitely.
Well, it's tough for Cheeto Mussolini to always be paying
I
attention.
was waiting for
Ding,
it.
ding, ding.
I've got a bingo card now.
Yeah, I don't like. Is he even there? Is he even present? Dementia Don is just, everyone is just placating him. They say for folks with Alzheimer's and dementia, you just jump into their world because otherwise it upsets them. And I feel like this is what everybody's doing with him, is they're just letting him go because they don't want to see him tantrum and shit himself.
It's been, anyways. I'll let you pivot now, Greg. But I think it was worthy of a throw out there.
Well, without giving a spoiler alert, we're oddly, instead of Odysseus this weekend, I saw Minions versus Monsters, and not to give a spoiler alert, but I think the Minions people did us a solid, or the people at Universal did us a solid because
now it's on my list. It's on my radar.
In the story, it's the monster trying to story the world is a huge orange blob. Let's put that.
There we go. All right, awesome.
And I'm like, this can't be a coincidence. This can't be a coincidence.
Absolutely not.
So that was they did us a solid on that one. So I was pretty psyched for that. So yeah, no, it's so I think one of the things, I know I introduced the conversation last week a little bit around the idea of the Senate. Matt, I thought we had some great conversation, a borderline debate, but I think that's healthy about where the party's going. And one of the things, I kind of blame myself for this, we kind of skipped over, was the idea of we got to hold some seats too. The gains are great, and in a wave year, I'd expect to be very hard for any Democrats to get upset. But again, you look at the numbers, and right now the dollars are a problem. They got $130 million in the bank, and we've got $2 million in debt. So the idea that stuff could come out of left field isn't impossible. But I think I failed to talk about the El Said versus Stevens race, and I thought that would be an interesting place for us to go, because that primary is next week, and I think in the kind of state it's in, I think I'm going to throw it out there for you guys to talk about it, but I think it's an important one for us to talk about, because I think it really puts a lot of contours about what we were talking about last week.
Well, and you mentioned it a little bit. It speaks to let's say the Senate is one, then how do we pivot relative to leadership as well?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's also significant right now. I think both minority leadership in both houses is questionable. Is that a fair way of putting it? And so all those nuances. And I know that, speaking of the House, the gentleman that probably is going to win from Utah, that new district, he didn't support Pelosi when he went back, and so it's interesting. But yeah, holding those houses, like you said, we mentioned, the purple states, those type of things, that Trump did well and surprised us all in 24, causes us some pause of how we're going to go down that path, to keep those particular seats for sure.
Well, I did some research. I was in Michigan in 2020, did a lot of work on the campaign. I did some research on some of the numbers from 2024. Did swing from about a 80,000 vote victory to 80,000 vote loss. And clearly the starting point was the Muslim vote. There was a lot of I think Trump actually, depending on what poll you looked at, probably outgained was defeated Harris among the Muslim vote, which you think about is pretty incredible. Probably Stein won the three of them.
Yeah.
But that was not enough to make 150,000 vote difference. But I think it was the starting point. I think especially in Ann Arbor and Dearborn, there's a lot of not just Muslim votes, a lot of sympathy for the Muslim vote. And so I think that was the starting point. And obviously it makes El Said a pretty compelling candidate alongside of that, when you've got Stevens, who is kind of unabashedly taking money from APIC, which probably is not a place you want to be in the Democratic Party right now.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. And,
So relative to that, you talk. I mean, again, going back, and I don't know how effective it is at this point. We're almost 2 years out, replaying 24. I mean, because the nuances associated with the way that whole race laid out and lined up is, I guess we keep saying that, maybe lifetime, with the incumbent dropping out and then getting the nominee so late in the year and stuff, and then. But I've been watching, the flavor, the vote in the House. I think we may have touched on it last week about, again, and how the party's going to roll this out. But the changing or the support for Palestine or support, and not for the government. And I really want to be clear about this, not for the government of Israel. I think every the Democrat out there has got to start using that language about the government of Israel, not Israel, because it's such a nuance, and that's a ticking time bomb, and it's going to be utilized during this midterm.
And I think Bandami again is getting it right. He's going right after Netanyahu. He's trying his best to keep him on New York City. I guess that didn't work, but he's not. He realizes obviously he's got a large Jewish population, and he gets it.
But he's polling decent with the Jewish population. What is it, 40%?
Definitely. But I think the Jewish population gets it. They get that they're not. They're obviously not being self-defeating and going against this Gaza policy. They're against the government in power. And frankly, Netanyahu was polling at 20% before they whatever however you want to describe Gaza invading Israel, etc. Hamas invading Israel. You got he was on his way out. And again, and there will be a no confidence vote, I think, in the near future, a new election, but he was done. And again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but damn, it was a coincidence that helped him out.
It helped him out significantly, and then it pivots back to the discussion we had about the book War, and it really does take we've pulled the shades back about those relationships, and Biden got up in his grill significantly because of the jeopardy, the how he put folks in really quite awkward positions throughout that whole time. So, yeah, I would agree with you. I don't know about conspiracy theory, but it's better to be lucky than good sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a lot of people suffered, but man, he made sure the way he conducted that. I'm sure he's got a different word for it than war sometimes too, but the way he conducted his policy against Gaza, he made sure to drag it out as long as possible. He did it in ways that did not cut to the chase, and again, dragged his administration out as long as possible as well.
I really like, Paul, what you said about the language and how we have to start using different language, because I think it is such a charged thing being, pro-Palestine or pro-Israel, and we really got to find some of these nuances in our language to make it people centered again, right? Because that's something we talked about a couple of weeks ago is, being a caring human being for other human beings is what we want the government to be focused on, right? Not just the rich, not just the poor, not just the black, the white, the Muslims, the Hindu, whatever. And so that nuance of the frustration, concern, anger at, in this case, the government of Israel. I think it's a big difference. It's a little shift, but it makes a big difference. Yeah. And I think MAGA really has capitalized on the language piece of it. Calling, making the word socialist and communism interchangeable. It's like they're two very, very different things. They're playing word games. I'm not necessarily saying we play word games, but we need to be more specific and more intentional with our words.
But to be truthful, there are people in our government calling for the government takeover. Oh, that's right. That's Trump that's doing that. I'm sorry. I forgot I said the
Oh, God. Yeah, I think you nailed it. And it's just the words are going to matter. And that was part of the conversation that we had last week about where does the where does the party go? And in the messaging is, crucial. Um, because, like you said, we're Marlon, and I run in the gym every day, and I have a whole lineup, and when I'm on the treadmill, and I hope to get in front of the ESPN or CNN screen, but occasionally I get Fox News, and
Mhm.
man, they are doubling down on the socialist, communist, cinnamon type, guys, help me out. I'm not great. Anonymous, thank you. Terms, they're so predictable. It didn't take much more than 24, 48 hours after we won New York City, and these type of primaries and stuff. It's just, and that's the strategy. It's as old as, again, we mentioned it goes back to Truman. So with the 100, now we're down to 99 or 98 days, Greg.
Well, it's 100 today. As of today, it's
It's
100.
100
So
today.
Wow.
14
Okay.
weeks from Tuesday. Yeah. So we're getting in that. You guys know I like to do the countdown. So
Yep.
this is the kickoff for it. To my mind, is you're in the zone now. And I think it's again, like I said, I think despite everything they did with gerrymandering, I think we have to feel the House is in good shape when you look at the generic ballots. Again, a lot of the House is already locked in on both sides.
Hey,
It's
if
really
you
down
can
to
get a seat from Utah, things are going well.
yeah. Well, and the
Mm.
truth is, there's not a lot of seats that are competitive at this point because even when they gerrymandered, they kind of shoved all the Democrats into one seat. So the Democrats
Exactly.
will win a certain number of seats. So, but it is a artificial 25 seat. Let's say bounce the Republicans are getting shouldn't affect us in this election, will affect us in election in the future. The Senate again is the part where I think we have an opportunity that I never expect honestly after 2024, and I really think there's people who, you had all the people around Harris complaining after Harris, but the truth is, it could have been worse. This isn't a binary situation. We could have been if Biden had stayed in, I would have thought we would have lost another 3 or 4 Senate seats, and we would then had a number we would have been chasing for potentially for a generation to catch up because it takes so long to shift these seats. But we were not as bad. And again, Trump fueling it gives us an opportunity here, which I never expected we would have when on what is it? It was November 7th or whatever, 2024. I never
So you're
thought we'd be in a
saying
position. Yeah.
that traditionally the incumbent loses seats in the midterm,
Yep.
and Trump, with his wonderful performance and insight, is putting that on steroids.
Exactly. There is no way when you were sitting there in 2024 that you looked at the map because like I said, you always kind of go back 6 years. The 2020 was a favorable Democratic map because Biden. So you're okay, 6 years later, that's gonna be a tough map for Democrats to repeat anyway. There is no way we should have been in a position to potentially take back the Senate. And right now I think it's the betting markets have it 60-40, but I think if you really peel it, it's closer to 50-50. They have a 60-40 Republican. I think it's closer to 50-50 in reality right now. I think it's a coin toss. So again, I'm going to do this, and it's not going to be the most technological. I'm going to try to do a Tim Russert board here, and I got a pretty good piece in
Hey,
there.
that's pretty
So
good.
Yeah.
yeah, so it's all again, I'm going to up my what you call it game soon, my expo game, and get better color soon. But so you think about it right now. I'd say I kind of sent you guys something during the week. We're at about 45-45 right now. I'd say that if you locked it in. Democrats are really protecting 2 seats, and I'm wearing my Ossoff shirt today. I think Ossoff isn't talking about 2026. He's got this one, I think, in good shape. He's the question on Ossoff now is he running in 2028 for president? Then you got Michigan, and again, we can do a little deeper dive on Michigan. I got a lot, both actually experience in both those states pretty deep from that 2020 campaign. But then you look at the map that the Republicans are now defending. Um, you know, Maine. I think we got a better chance of winning North Carolina than Maine, but Maine, just because it's the only blue state that we're really trying to do a pickup in, is a have to have. Started to get a little more interest in Jackson today online. Um, I could see why Planter was the nominee before everything happened. Not the most dynamic guy, but hopefully that sells in a state like Maine. The steak and not the sizzle kind of thing. North Carolina, I feel very good about. Cooper is very popular there. His opponent sucks. And then Ohio, I think a Sherrod Brown would have won in 2024 if I think the election was this. So I feel good about Ohio. That gets us to if you take those three, shift them over to us, that gets us to 50. Then you got to win. In my mind, you got to win two of these next ones because if we're 51, like I said, we need a Fetterman-proof majority. I like Alaska the best because she's a known commodity up there. She's the House member. I think she has a real good chance there statewide. Iowa, I give ahead of Texas only because it's got a history of going blue, and I think the farmers are really losing their shit, for lack of a better word,
Right.
over Trump. Now with the fertilizer price. And then I like Tallarico. It's just, God, it feels like we're chasing the white elephant in Texas. And then the two that are, kind of on the fringe, Nebraska. We talked last week. We had the Democratic candidate drop out to hopefully let the independent come in, who is going to supposedly caucus with the Democrats, but then again, who knows if we get another Fetterman involved. And then South Carolina, since Lindsey Graham's sister seems crazier than he is, maybe there's a chance there. I'm assuming she's running for it, but I haven't even followed that close enough. But I'm assuming the unknown there puts South Carolina a little bit of an argument. But that's the way the map lays out. So they're in my position defending 8 seats, probably really 6 if you break it down. We're defending 1 seat. So again, I want to kind of clarify that, and we'll try to use this board a little better. I'm going to get better with technology. But to a little Tim Russert, and I apologize to his memory for forgetting his name last week. But I think using that'll be a little bit of a tool we'll use during the next 14 weeks. So yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the numbers, lay of the land. So.
Yeah.
But I think my experience in Michigan, we did, and I don't know if I ever kind of went over with you guys in Michigan in 2020. We were out there. I had a job out there just north of Detroit, and we were about a 4 or 5 hour ride from Iowa. And so when the caucuses started, and we were Biden supporters, we actually went out there a few times. We were there the night of the caucuses, which was, if you remember correctly, that was the night of the disaster. They couldn't count the votes correctly, et cetera. And Buttigieg beat Sanders by a sliver on that one. And that was an interesting night for us because we got to know the candidates quite a bit through through the people who were out there supporting them. And the Buttigieg people were just impressive across the board. Warren people were very impressive. The Sanders people were not being very friendly, and the Biden people were few and far between. He got clobbered because of it.
Right.
And then, the whole thing happened. I don't rewrite history. We ended up actually going down to South Carolina just a few days before COVID, helping the South Carolina primary. Biden wins South Carolina, and we're feeling good about ourselves. And we were at that point very involved in the Michigan primary campaign. And this is the way I would describe it. For a while before Biden won South Carolina, I was literally his number 2 guy in Michigan. The guy, Bill Kelly, he had led the auto industry bailout back around 2009. Really bright young guy. And he was basically the chairman of the Biden campaign at that point. If he had 2 speeches booked in one night, I went to the second one. This is how bad it was. And we would get lists every day. Mary Alice and I would call people in Michigan that were supporting Biden. We would get our names every day. That's how few people were on Biden's list in Michigan. I mean, it was bad. And then it turned like that. And it's funny, we weren't in Michigan the night of the primary. We had vacation scheduled in California. And then literally that night, they were starting to go through some precautions of COVID. COVID kicks in. And we got very involved both during the primaries and then during elections. I think between the two of us, we made over 10,000 phone calls. And we were just dialing for dollars. I was doing my work on off hours, just dialing for everything we do for Biden. And I got involved as a captain in Michigan, just very involved. Then actually, it's funny, the team I was involved with in Oakland County, Michigan, they asked us to run Ossoff's Atlanta, Georgia campaign during the runoff, which of course was January 5th, the night before everything,
Right.
we didn't even get a chance to enjoy that. And then of course the insurrection happens. So I was involved in that too. And again, did somewhere kind of 2,000, 3,000 calls in a month, also guiding people, whatever. So kind of got to really know the people in Michigan a little bit. And I'd say there wasn't, even at that point in 2020, there was a dissatisfaction that the Democratic Party wasn't doing enough. Clearly, the labor unions, huge thing in Michigan. It's a huge driver. I think the labor unions tend not to be as progressive because they don't
Right.
want to. One of the things, if you know that when they use the term, Cadillac plans with the ACA, one of the big people that was fighting the ACA was the labor unions because they didn't want their Cadillac plans to be taxed for these really rich plans they were giving their union members. So there is definitely a centrist mindset among a lot of the high-powered unions that they don't want to rock the boat much. They don't want to see too much change. So I think the unions tend not to be as progressive as some of the and frankly, and this saying this without being, but the black vote tends not to be as progressive as sort of the liberal white vote either. So that's an interesting thing in Michigan. And then you run into also you have the college cities, which are a huge part of the deal. So you kind of was running into all those barriers, and we'd hear them all on the phone with these people because when you call, you get a full demographic flow of the person. You know where they live, their precinct, their voting history, or their response history to previous polls, whatever. So you get a good feel for the people. Of course, I mean, when I say I made 10,000 calls, I probably reached about 2,000 people because most people
Right.
pick up these calls.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
yeah.
these people get sick
I
of
know
it. They're
the
called
drill.
by the same campaign 8, 9, 10 times. And it's
Mm.
like, you want to say, hey, I'm from Connecticut. You're lucky somebody cares about your vote. It's like it's like your vote counts or something. So anyway, so that's kind of sort of my background with Michigan and a little bit with Georgia. But that's where I think the demographic shift that they're going through now, I think is driven by a part of it. But I think it's interesting. Haley Stevens was her first congressional race in 2020. Her and Melissa Slotkin at the time, so got to know her pretty well in terms of working on her campaign there. Thought she was a good candidate. Like I said, I think she's put a hole in her game with her Israel support, especially in Michigan. But that's sort of the lay of the land I'm coming from as I looked at this El Said Haley Stevens matchup that's going to work itself out in 9 days.
So you said we have my memory serves me correct. We have the primary in Arizona this week, right?
Arizona was last week, and what
Last
happened
week,
was the Democrats were pretty set up, but it was
Yep.
when the Republicans
Republican,
because we
and
own
it
most
was
of
the
the House.
deniers, right?
Yeah. So the
Yeah.
big time. The guy Biggs is well known, one of the first people, the congressional people who was on the list to deny the vote because he was from Arizona, especially. He's their governor, I believe. A really serious denier is their Secretary of State is up for Secretary of State, and another one for Attorney General. So the
Right.
stakes now in Arizona basically are if they win the Democratic candidate is not going to get the electoral votes from Arizona in 2028. They are going to deny these guys are not going to call it for a Democrat no matter what. And so now we've taken those votes out of play, basically, in a sense. So anyway, sorry, Karin, I've interrupted you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah.
no. I was
And I do think Mark Kelly has a chance of being the nominee too, which would make it that much more fascinating. Because now and again, that Senate seat would open up as well, which I think it's opening up either way. But so there's a lot of I think it's interesting because I think it was a signal because it was a warning sign because I think we're running a little bit of a tailwind right now. But between the money and what's going on in Arizona, it's a harsh reminder that we got a lot to do here.
So does for the general populace rather than just the party, because we know the Republican Party is dysfunctional, or we wouldn't be living with Trump. How will deniers play out? My understanding is, generally speaking, across the country, those who get, in primaries. Now, this goes, Arizona goes contrary to this. Is normally those who have gotten Trump support haven't had a great record. So as we transition to a general populace, and Arizona really kind of pushed back, will
Maricopa
just wondering
County.
for the GOP, is that a strategy that we? Again, we got to get hustling, but is that a favorable strategy if they're just going to go? I mean, I don't understand. I still don't understand the obsession with thinking that this election, except for the fact that let's make it difficult for folks that don't like what we're doing to vote. But I just don't understand if it's going to play out well for the general populace, this emphasis of just reliving 2020 time and time again. It's just, and Mike Lee's in my state, so he's the sponsor for the Save America Act, and I just marvel at I guess I'm making the biggest assumption in that people are knowledgeable and have common sense, and they should be able to see what's going on. And I guess I'm just naive. I don't get it at all. I don't understand.
I think what we hope for, I think, is the the idea that the people with the common sense understand what the deniers are saying, which is everything's rigged unless we win,
Right. That there
you
it is.
know, and, hoping that those are the people that are like, even if they were kind of like, well, there's always a question about how is everyone following the rules and how legit are these things? Is it really a vote of the people? But that they're realizing that the people who are yelling, fraud and voter fraud and all that stuff, the loudest are the ones who are also saying, well, it's only rigged if we lose,
Yeah.
right? And that logic isn't logicking.
So
Yeah.
definitely the people who say the Democrats somehow rigged it in 2016, forgot to rig it, or rigged it in 2012, forgot to rig it in 2016, rigged it in 2020, forgot to rig it in 2024. It's like,
Right.
it's like
Right. Like
if we're
if Democrats were that organized and
exactly.
that, sneaky about it, wouldn't we be cleaning up everywhere? Wouldn't it be just blue across the country? Like that's the part that I feel like maybe some people are starting to go, wait a minute. How can you be that selectively smart and then that selectively stupid? Like it just again, the logic isn't logicking.
We, we know what I think it is, Paul, to your point. I get
Yeah.
what you're saying. You're right. Normally what's been happening is Trump nominees do very well in the primaries, do not do well in the generals. But I kind of look at the what we thought in 2016 when we thought that the Republican Party gave us a gift by nominating Trump, and especially after the pussy grabber video, et cetera, that hey, he just handed everything to Hillary, et cetera. That it's and again, I remember when they remember when everybody thought Trump might drop out, which God knows how that would have played out, but that he might drop out after the pussy grabber thing. And the Democrats are like, oh no, he's got to stay in. And I'm like, let's be careful what we ask for here, because
Right.
maybe we
Yeah,
get a
right.
sane human being now that we could live with. And that's what I'm worried about is, we could make, I think there's probably a better 50% chance you're 100% right, is that we have a better chance of beating these guys, but God help us if they win. That's the problem,
Yeah, and
and
that's what I'm hearing you
Mm.
say.
yep.
If what happens in 28 uh, if they're in office for
Oh,
sure.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And then again, you take a state like Arizona out, and then you start to worry about other. I worry about one, like remember back in 2020, Trump was really working on the legislators from Pennsylvania, and he had them into the hotel, the Trump
Yep.
hotel,
Mm.
and you're like, well, if he gets Pennsylvania, it's not enough. It doesn't matter. And of course, he's talking to Roethlisberger, his name is down in Georgia.
Atlanta. Yeah.
But if I think the theory of the case for them is that they get one state to flip, they can
That
get
can
every
yeah.
state the crazies the confidence to move forward. But they
Yeah.
they they need somebody to set the example for them. So
Well, again, that goes back to um, some of the dialogue that Mike Lee was having. Because he was, he's as well as many of these guys are I'm a firm supporter of the Constitution. I carried it in my pocket. Yet they were entertaining this, other pool of electors,
sure.
and somehow gathering up some type of insight that it would be legal. And I think you said nailed it. If you could just get one state to send another group of electors, then who knows where this thing would have ended up, right? And what it would have been. But here's the interesting, and here's another thought that's completely random out there in left field. So pull me back in. But if they had sent other electors, what would have Pence done then?
Yeah.
Right? If he goes, I mean, he was able to do his job because they weren't there. But what if there's two groups, there's an exercise that doesn't really matter, but it's intriguing.
And that's what Massey has said is when it came to it. And again, I think we're all sort of bigger Massey fans than most Republicans, other Republicans. He has said that the reason he made it very clear, I think it was on Morning Joe a couple weeks ago, and he made it very clear that the reason he wasn't for the overturning election is that none of the other states set an alternative set of electors. He said we had nothing to go by, but he kind of left it open. And again,
Yeah.
he's not going to be there this time no matter what, but he kind of left it open. If there was another slate of electors, he probably would have went along with it. But nobody put those electors up because frankly, those people were at this point worried about going to jail for fraud, etc. So that again, you go, wait a second, this is a guy who we kind of look as one of the sanest of them now.
Yeah.
He's telling us he wasn't that far away. And then you start to do the math in your head about what could really happen here, you know?
So how do they? So I really asked that question for both of you to say, okay, and I've heard Karin say this, and um, the numbers all great, and it goes back to our conversation. So what's the messaging? How do we teach folks? And I just don't sometimes think like if we're good enough to stay on point and really come up with the 3 or 4 bullets that we're just going to be a dog on a bone, and we're just going to really stay to it, and just Karin articulated great. Look at there's only fraud when you lose. So come on, guys, let's go. And not to mention that there's only fraud, okay, when but the elections that Trump's responsible for. So what are we doing here, and um, how does the party message that without being, then it just becomes a big distraction and we pull into that fight and mudslinging that Trump is really so good at.
Yeah,
So we can't call them idiots to their face.
yeah, they don't like that.
Nah, it doesn't work real good as a strategy.
No, but I think asking the question of, because I've had conversations with people who are not exactly full out MAGA, but definitely still on that. Well, Trump's done some things. He's done some good things. And I say, what?
Yeah.
Tell me what he's done. Tell me what he's done well. And I mean, I'm definitely way behind you guys in terms of being on top of politics and the races and all of that stuff. But I know enough to know he hasn't actually done anything, right? Nothing good, nothing positive, aside from make his friends and cronies and family wealthier.
Tons of money.
Right. Right. He's not making my life easier where it matters, right? In financial means, um, you know, as a professional, he hasn't made my life easier. As a social worker, he's making more people hurt. He's taking away, right? But like, so anything that has happened, it's not positive for the people. And so I think, you don't have to point out someone as an idiot. You can just kind of test their knowledge. Like, you think that he's done great things, just tell me what they are. I'm listening.
Yeah.
Right. And, they might get mad and whatever, but I think it is important for us to point out, that cognitive dissonance, right? That you're saying one thing, but you have no actual facts to back it up.
I think we're Republicans, and I don't think they're wrong on this. They can gain traction on the socialism/communism argument among the people they're targeting. I don't think a similar type of targeting works among the Democratic base. I think they want to be motivated, they want to be led. I think and Paul, you and I, we've been talking about this for a while. Karin, you've been obviously involved in these conversations. I think we got to go. I think we got to go towards policy. I think one of the things I think Republicans win first and then worry about policy. I don't think that worked. It's just because we're different types of people. Obviously, that's what gets us here. I think, and I would have said, 4 years ago, win first and worry about the policy. I think we ought to lay the policies out, and I don't think the policies can be they're stupid and cheaters. I think it's got to
That's what
be
I'm saying. We can't do
robust. It's
that.
got
Yeah,
to
we can't.
be.
Yeah.
It's got to be. Yeah. What is wrong with? It's got to challenge the notion that just because we're trying to make people's lives better makes it socialism. I think we have to challenge that notion aggressively, and we can't just give into. We can't get into an argument about what socialism is. We got to say, I don't really care what it is. It makes people's lives better. You call it
Right.
whatever you want to call it. It's making people's lives better, and I think that's where we have to go with it.
And so what, if I'm going to throw out the question, I'm going to give it a number. So what would be the top 3 things, policy that if you were in the chair, Karin or Greg, that you would say these are ones that I have a couple in mind, but I'm curious where you guys would be. What would be those? First of all, the teasers that we get people to start listening, and then say, "Hey, yeah, Trump's not where I want to be. This is where I want to go."
I think one of the policies we should use right now, because Republicans aren't showing it, is financial discipline and start with,
Exactly.
and I think that goes right along with taxing the billionaires. I think that's got to be a policy. I think billionaires have never been as unpopular as they are right now. And I think then we got to talk directly about then creating a social system that allows people to, it's ultimately going to make for a better economy if we have a more productive populace. And I think we got to connect directly to that. They're taking wealth out of society, needs to go back into social sphere.
Right. And I think to piggyback on that, I think the money from the billionaires putting it towards universal health care, right? We need physically, emotionally, mentally healthy citizens who are not one medical issue away from homelessness.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
and then, within that comes, reproductive rights, women's health care, because that's all part of it too.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's really reinvesting money into your citizens.
Do you think, guys, that, I mean, you go with the tariffs, pick whatever point, but the war, the enormity of the spending by a conservative administration, and the amount of debt. I mean, was it 9 trillion now? Are we a deficit? I think that's the last number I
But
heard.
our deficit is up around, I think, almost in the 40s right now. But
Okay.
overall, but I mean, it's the
Yeah,
deficit
the overall,
Trump
the
is
nine is
charged.
just,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Trump's deficit, I think, is about 9 trillion that he's had
Correct,
under his
correct.
watch. Yeah.
So what are we? Is that going to resonate with people that we're we're, we're spending? We just like, I think I'm piggybacking off of you, Karen, and Greg. Tax the billionaires. What is the plan to go forward and move out of this disaster?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like the deficit is such a big number now that it becomes too difficult for people to wrap their brains around.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can say we're 40 trillion in debt, but like, for a normal person, right? You get into a certain amount of credit card debt and it doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
You're never getting out. So it doesn't matter. So I think focusing more on like what the spending has been on, right? Because you throw out that giant number, people are just going to be like, well, I'm going to be dead before it's paid off anyway. And I'm 12. So like, whatever. Um, I think focusing on, well, the why of where did that money come from? Where did it go? Bombs for a war that was illegal, right? Like what's happening? What are we spending it on? And how has that spending made your life better? Right? If we're spending trillions of dollars on universal health care and we don't have to pay those premiums out of our checks every week or every other week or whatever, right? That would be a huge gain to just my family, never mind. And we have
What
fairly reasonable health care.
in your corporation isn't paying the part either. So again, they like to make it, well, we're just taxes are going up, but the taxes are all being spent in the form of premiums, like we are saying in our exchanges. So
Right.
it's less efficient than it should be. I think one of the points you're up is really good, Karen. That I think and again, Republicans know this. Especially the people with the money know this. There's a difference between an expense and an investment, and it's
Mm-hmm.
basic finance. And the Republicans will never, and of course, they want businessmen to be in charge, but they'll never talk that way that when you invest money, you get a return. And I think that's a really important part of what's going on. Like the country almost needs a balance sheet to show where we're really investing our money. It's not just going out the door like when we give a tax break to a billionaire. That money just goes in there, and they don't reinvest that money anymore. They're going to invest money anyway. They invest what they want to invest regardless.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a point people miss when it comes to this. Not everything that is spent is an expense. It's investing in something that's going to add value.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always used myself as a personal example. The older I get, the more knowledgeable I become about what my parents' circumstances were. And so I qualified for a Pell Grant. I got my 3 college degrees, and now I'm pretty self-sufficient, and I'm paying back to the community in many ways, not just financially, but in service and those type of things. And and that reminded me of when you talk about investing and just the perspective that folks have towards whether it's post-secondary training, college. I'm not really worrying about that debate right now, but how do we invest in people? And Karin, you brought it up as well with the universal healthcare. That's an investment in people, and not to mention, what do we do as preventative healthcare, right? If we can keep people healthier, our cost goes down as well. And so I think that's a great way to articulate that, Greg, because we turn around and say, okay, the war, what is the return on that investment? Right
Even
now,
for people,
we
even
don't
people
have
who,
any.
well, and even people who believe in military spending, what are we getting out of this? What was the threat to begin with? What, what bad stuff did we stop from this? Right? I'm not sure you can come up with a lot that you can say, oh, well, yeah, there was an imminent threat. Well, what was the threat? And how has that been eliminated at this point? Right? I'm not in
And the worst
weeds of
part
it,
of
but
this war has been the depletion of, and again, are way underestimating how much it's costing us, but the depletion of the military hardware and assets we built up over the years that we're
100%.
just depleting like crazy now.
mhm,
And they said the strategic oil reserves is the lowest point in 45 years because the only way he's keeping oil from completely jumping out of control. And truth was, it wasn't really replenished that well after COVID. And again, Biden's probably gonna take some blame for that one. But that's not a problem because it's there for a reason. That's not just to keep oil prices low, and you get all sorts of problems. I think the best way to carve this argument out, though, there's two ways. One is the deficit, the annual deficit just recently crossed our GDP. All right, total
Right.
deficit just recently crossed our GDP. And I think that's important because that's like saying your credit card debt now exceeds your annual income. That's
mhm,
something people can grab onto. Well, wait a second, that's a big number. I'm never making that up.
Right.
I think the bigger problem with the deficit is there is long-term financial damage in terms of interest rates. It should be happening again, and it's sort of happening now. Weren't happening for a long time when the rates were kept artificially low. That's a very esoteric argument for people to understand. I agree. Don't even go there. But talk about things. Talk about per household costs. That if there's, let's say there's 200 million households in this country, if the military spending jumps up to $1 trillion a year, that means every family in this country is spending $5,000 in the military. People might be a little surprised at that. One of the things that drives me crazy when they interview men or women on the street, and they're like, "I don't want my taxes going to this or that." Meanwhile, if you took away what the government's already given them in terms of putting their kids through school, their fire, police, whatever, their taxes are already accounted for in a lot of cases. So
Yeah.
it's not their
mhm,
tax dollars they're actually making the impact. So I think that getting people the mindset of where your tax dollars are really going, and frankly, in Social Security, if it works right, isn't your tax dollars. That's your FICA, and that's going to be there for you in the future.
That's
So
our money.
I think
mhm,
breaking down where we're really spending money and what is coming out of your pocket and where it's going, I think
mhm,
that might be a really effective way to get people the mind. Again, if we spend $1 billion on some, that's not a lot per family. But these numbers do start to get funny. But what did your tax dollars go to? I think is a way to get people the mindset and creating maybe this national billboard campaign or whatever. This is where your tax dollars are going because of Republicans.
I agree.
yep,
I just, I don't know what the exact message in these next 100 days. I think will be intrigued in our conversations to look at where the messaging is. What strategy? I mean, there's people that are, meeting right now to figure this thing out and see what the messaging will be and how well is it being listened to. Because clearly, over the last since 2016 there's a large portion of the populace that doesn't care what the messaging is. So there's a very narrow amount of folks, and you experienced it with your work in Michigan and stuff, Greg, that you really focus an inordinate amount of energy because and actually left and right, there's about folks that are just vote no matter what. So
Yep.
the folks that are going to be the deciders, for lack of a better say, is a really narrow swath of people.
mhm.
It's funny. I'd be calling people and they'd be going, "Could you please stop calling me?" And I'd be like, "Just say you've made up your mind. We'll stop calling you." Just
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
People call them and they're like, "I haven't made my mind up yet." Well, tell us you made up your mind and we'll stop calling you. You don't have to vote the way you tell us on the phone. Just tell us you made up your mind. You know. So
But the
yeah, no,
messaging,
it's a very,
watching
very
how it rolls out is going to be intriguing.
Saturday Night Live had a skit years ago. I can't even remember which generation it was in, and they had and it was on the weekend news or whatever, and they were slicing down, well, not really 50% of the people voted for this guy because 30% don't vote and this, that.
Right.
And they basically said it came down to one person, and there's that movie. That's
Yeah,
everybody else fell into some group that was accounted for. One person decided the election. And it's kind of the feeling you get sometimes when you pare it all down. We're in a very narrow group of people who are deciding all this stuff. So,
and there's a
terrifying.
conversation for another night.
yes,
The
definitely.
Electoral College just as a whole, right?
Oh, definitely. No, definitely. And I've got some actually contrary opinions about that too, about the way our elections would be run differently, right? If it wasn't for electoral college. Doesn't mean we shouldn't go to it, but it means you can't, it's run a certain way. But that is a whole nother conversation. But no, it is an interesting period we're heading into. Paul, one of the things you brought up, the SAVE Act, and actually there was a little news piece I read the other day, interesting because Trump, they're still trying to, reconciliation is a funky process, but basically reconciliation means, different bills pass in the House and Senate and they reconcile them. The
Right.
Republicans have done effectively is they've attached some unpopular things in the reconciliation bill, so technically they don't vote for it. It slips in there. And then nobody has to get blamed for voting for it. The SAVE Act, somebody mentioned that even Republicans will admit at this point, if it were to go through, it would be impossible to implement in
Yeah,
a
they
short
can't put
time
it
frame.
together by November.
And that I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Because he's still harping on
Well,
it.
and so but he's crazy like a fox. I'll leave that to you, Karen, to see what type of name you're going to come up with. But he's looking 28 already. And that's clearly demonstrates that.
Well, he's not reality based. I think we need to stop assuming that there's any part of him that is, right? And the people, that his handlers and the human insulation that's around him, I don't know what they're doing or why they're doing it exactly, except to keep their jobs. But there's no part of this human trash that is based in reality anymore.
Human
and
trash
I think
on the jingo card.
You remember the old well, you wouldn't, but because I wasn't even born. But it was the Marx brother that would have the special word of the day, and the duck would come down. We're going to do that whenever Karen comes up with the new title. I'm going to work on the technology. We're going to
technology. I was
going to
say, yeah.
Karen's screen.
Just a big angry Cheeto drops some.
Yeah. That's even better.
We give a Cheetos bag pop out of the.
Yeah.
Let's not get sued by Cheeto. Okay.
Exactly.
Let's just.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Exactly. No,
I enjoy a good Cheeto.
Orange. Then we'll do it. We'll get an orange duck.
Exactly.
Okay.
We'll combine both generations.
Did I tell you my 47 story? You know how there's that brand of sports gear called 47? It was built in 1947. So I have a Red Sox hat with a 47 on the side. And I thought to myself one day, I said, gee, I really don't like that it's got that 47 on the side there.
Right.
So we were down in Florida. We went to Lakeland to see the Red Sox and Tigers in a spring training game. And on the way back, we stopped in Disney Springs to have dinner. And there was a guy sitting next to me, and he was from the Villages, which, frankly, the Villages is getting there's a lot of liberals coming out of Villages now, speaking of, but he was a little nuts, I could tell. And he whispers me off the side. He goes, I like that you embroidered your hat with that 47, really sneaky, so they don't get what we're doing. I'm like, oh, damn it. I'm like, because I had thought of this word. So I have now a big black X going to the 47 on the side of my hat. So. Yeah, it's like that they got to change their branding there because
I was gonna say you should send a picture of that to the company and just be like, FYI.
I think I put it on Facebook for a bit, but nobody got it. So it's like but I know but it's everywhere now, right? We can't enjoy our baseball hats because this guy,
Yeah. Well, every time I see somebody wearing a red baseball cap, I'm doing a double take because I'm like, what does it say? What is it? Is this someone I need to cross the street? Is this someone I need to get ready for them to be unhinged at me? Even, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago with the 250th anniversary. It's like it makes me feel cautious about being patriotic and being proud of my country because I'm not right now. Right. And so then that makes you feel kind of traitorous, and it makes me look at people who are like super patriotic and posting all this stuff on Facebook about the holiday and what I mean. I live a stone's throw from Bristol, Rhode Island, that has the oldest 4th of July parade in the country, and they're so proud of it. It's a little creepy, but but it's something that people who are from Bristol and from this area, they really hang their hat on. And they paint the lines down the main drag red, white, and blue, and they have for decades. But it's just like, it makes me go, ew, how am I supposed to feel about this? Because the people who are waving the flag the hardest are the people who seem to hate our country the most, or at the very least hate the people that make up the country the most. And so it's just, there's been so much taken away by MAGA, that simple things of enjoyment, like a hat, or just feeling good about celebrating a national holiday. It's like, now I feel gross and dirty and I have to take a shower. Ew.
Well,
And
certainly,
this was something I didn't want to talk too much around the 4th of July, because I brought it up a few years ago, and I think I got slapped down pretty good by some people online about it. But this whole, and there was a photo back around the State of the Union. It was of Trump's cabinet, and one of them wrote in, which is crazy on a bunch of levels, that the best cabinet in 250 years. So
well,
A, not the best cabinet, but B, it's not 250 years since the Constitution, 250 years
yeah.
since the Declaration of
Well,
Independence.
I thought the same thing when I
Yeah,
heard the same thing and thought the same thing. And I'm
yeah.
like, oh, this is just like, you know,
I'm thinking
it's
of
history 101. It's not even a deep
yeah.
dive. It's just
Right.
fundamentals.
I'm thinking of
Well,
branding a website and the real 250. So let's do this again in
Mhm.
what is it, June 21st of 2037, I think, or 2038. So that's the date that New Hampshire ratified the Constitution. They were the ninth state, and that made the Constitution in effect. And so to me, that's really our 250th anniversary of the Constitution, which of course they claim to we the people all over the place, and they don't
Right.
seem to understand these are
right.
two different documents.
Right. They don't even have their basic facts
No,
straight. And that's what's so frustrating about
no,
it.
definitely.
Which makes going back to my original question to both of you. Thank you so much for your insights. But it's like it's that much more difficult to what's your message, what's your brand, what are what are we going to do to win elections because of all. I mean, just listening to the three of us, the nuances are just so prevalent, and Trump has just impacted every corner of this, the language, I mean, even, they had a bipartisan group for the 250th anniversary, and they took it over. And now I can't remember which brand is which. So when I see something on television with the 250, I don't know if it's the bipartisan one or the one that Trump created. I mean, so you can go stir crazy trying to process, what's authentic and what's,
Hmm.
that's why, Netflix, bless their hearts, have done a boatload of good, documentaries on things. And I always look at who the executive producer is to decide if I could watch it. Like I know Doris Goodwin was one of those. Oh, I can watch this and different stuff. And they're very good about trying to get folks from the right and the left to comment on things. But it brought up the very thing you just mentioned, Greg. And one of them I was watching, the actual date of the Continental Congress and the Constitution being, well, I guess I'm rambling, so I apologize.
No, no, it's
But
all
if we were to ask, going back to what Karin said, if we were to ask the average person in the state, in the country, on the street, I would bet that most folks don't understand how long the Revolutionary War was. They would think that we won in 1776. I fully believe that they don't understand.
It was like the peace treaty of the war. It was like
Yeah, I mean, they don't even. I think I would venture that guess that there's fewer and fewer people that understand how long the Revolutionary War took. The Articles of Confederation, how it barely got us through the war, and then they were smart enough to say, "Hey, we got to get together and write a constitution."
The articles
and actually, when they got together, they didn't have they
the
weren't
articles
planning
really
on
come in
writing a
after the
constitution.
war. That's
Right.
the thing about the Declaration of Independence. There was the last thing they wanted in 1776 was to join together. They joined together to fight a war, basically. That was it.
That's it.
They
Yeah.
joined together,
And when it was
common enemy,
done,
fighting war,
yeah.
and then but the Articles of Confederation were they had nothing to them because they didn't give any central power. And then
Yep.
you go where you're going. But I don't know if you've. But speaking of Netflix, if you've watched the Larry David series, and the Obamas are producing it, if you haven't watched it, it's
hilarious.
great. Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
He's got two really in the second episode and in the fourth episode. He's got a second episode, and it's Rob Reiner's final thing he did. He did it before he got killed, And in the fourth episode, they take Bob Kennedy out the Rob RFK Jr. out to the woodshed. It's great. And
Yeah.
then again, and
Which
his
isn't very difficult.
and it hit well. And you remember Larry David's on on Persona wife during Curb was Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s real wife.
Mhm.
So and
Right.
she's the only person in his orbit not invited to the show, which makes it even funnier because everybody in his work. I mean, Jerry Seinfeld's been on shows. Everybody from the cast of Curb, and it's the only person. Cheryl Hines is nowhere to be found, so it's great. And they just eviscerated. I didn't see this week's episode yet. The last week's episode yet. They eviscerated Robert Kennedy Jr. It was great. So super. Well, we got a lot of great things to talk about going forward, and I really appreciate the lively conversation, guys. But thank you. I think by next week, I think this Michigan thing is going to be gaining a lot of steam, and these things obviously tend to work this way. And then, like I said, the week after that, we're going to have the Connecticut primary, which will be interesting. But we're in the zone now, heading right to the midterms, whether we like it or not. So here we go.
Yep.
So
All right.
great. Thank you, guys. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Thank
guys.
Bye.